One and all, welcome to this webinar with Entrepreneurial Scotland, where we wanted to talk to you a little bit more about overseas learning and development. Because we do recognise that, you know, it's not very often that you get an opportunity to go overseas for some of the leadership learning and development. And it's a significant consideration. So we thought it would be good to give you the opportunity to meet two people who have been there and done that and are willing to share their experiences. So for those of you I've not met, my name is Jules Lancastle. I'm Head of Executive Education here at Entrepreneurial Scotland, which means that my role really is to work with those entrepreneurial leaders who are at the coalface and are really experiencing significant growth and change in their business, because that's what happens when you are successful and you are pushing your business opportunity forward. So we, in Entrepreneurial Scotland, we are always looking at ways that we can support leaders of all kinds, but specifically in this executive education space, leaders that are experiencing that rapid transformation, and we seek to develop them, connect them and inspire them through access to world-class leadership learning, opportunities to visit places that they might not normally have ready access and insight to, and the opportunity to connect and make meaningful connections with people who are in the wider network of entrepreneurs that want to see Scotland do well and prosper. So they could be here in Scotland or they could be overseas as part of the Global Scot Network and others. So in the audience, I know that we've got a mix of people who, good to see some of you have already committed to coming along to Boston with us in October, so looking forward to seeing you there. I can see that there's also a few people who are considering coming along to Boston, so I'm hoping that we'll answer some of your questions today. But in addition to myself, we've also got in the room with me here, Paul Blackler from Drink Biotic, who came out to Boston with us back in May this year. And online, hopefully you can see our panelist, Scott Weir. Scott, give us a wave.
Hi, everyone.
From Pillow Partners. So just by way of introduction and to give our audience a little bit of a context and understanding of where you were coming from at the time that you decided to take the plunge and travel all the way to Boston to get some of this learning. I'm going to ask you to just introduce yourselves briefly. Tell us who you are and tell us a little bit about your background before and why you kind of came to Boston. So Paul, do you want to go first?
Absolutely. So hi, everyone. I'm Paul Blackler. My wife and I run Drink Biotic, which is a healthy, functional health drink made from the African baobab superfruit. We've been sort of on a journey over the last couple of years developing an innovative product, so it's quite new and unique in its space, tackling a number of health challenges like diabetes and gut health. So been involved with some entrepreneurial programs previously and incubators, and we're based at Glasgow Caledonian University. I'm a passionate learner myself, so I think this kind of thing naturally appealed to me. Babson had been on my radar for a little while, just because it kept cropping up and I kept hearing kind of great stories, and it looked like an amazing learning journey. I wasn't too sure initially around, you know, sort of taking the time out of the business and traveling all the way to Boston. And then actually a few people had been to Boston, including my sister and a couple of executive mentors, and it kept coming up and them saying, Boston's really funky in terms of startups and you should get yourself out there and check it out. And then, as things often happen in life, the opportunity came and I kind of grabbed it with both hands, and I guess we'll talk about more about what that looked like.
Fab, brilliant. Thanks, Paul. And Scott, let's hear from you for a wee bit, just to let the people know who you are.
Hello everyone, my name is Scott, my business is Pillow and we manage holiday homes. So I've been in business since 2005 with previous property management businesses, but this business Pillow has, yes, it's been quite successful over the last few years. It's 4 years old and we're at the stage where growing all over the UK and we want to go international. So I think it was probably a year and a half ago, I had heard a university professor speak from MIT who was over at one of the, was it the Scale Up Summit in Scotland in Stirling, I think, or Edinburgh. And he had mentioned, and he said, the one bit of advice I could give all people from Scotland, all business owners, is to get some learning from out with Scotland, because as good as Scotland is, you have a certain way of thinking. So the best thing you could possibly do for your business as an entrepreneur is go and get some learning from somewhere else. he was from America, from MIT, and he suggested obviously America, but he did highlight some of the changes in the thinking. So that stuck with me for probably 18 months. This opportunity came up and I thought, well, you know what, I would be crazy to ignore that bit of advice from someone that's been involved in a lot more businesses, startups, and the whole ecosystem longer than me. So Bill's advice back at the Scale Up Summit, I think it was, I remembered, and when this opportunity came up, I thought, well, that's perfect to implement his advice. So that's why I went this year.
Okay, thanks, Scott. So just keeping on that line of thought for a little while. So we went to Boston, and for those of you who are listening in, we had a relationship with Babson College over in Boston for more than a decade as Entrepreneurial Scotland. And the faculty there are very proactive and very tuned into a practical approach to leadership development. A faculty full of people who have been there and done that, have been entrepreneurs in their own right, and continue to advise in an entrepreneurial space. And part of what we were trying to achieve was make sure you've got a good development opportunity with Babson, but it's also about being in Boston and getting the inspiration from the entrepreneurial hub that is in New England there. So can you guys just share a little bit? You obviously took the plunge, you got out of your own backyard and you went over to America. What was the difference about being in Boston specifically? What did you pick up from that experience?
Yes, there's a few things for me. One, I think it's highlighted more and more how important it is sometimes to, work on your business rather than in your business, which is said a lot, and you can do that locally, but to do that sort of globally and just be in a completely different environment, completely different culture, which itself has a lot to offer. I mean, Boston itself is very entrepreneurial. There's a lot going on. Babson itself, #1 entrepreneurial school for 21 years, that really shines through as well. So I think it
lived up to its reputation, did it?
Definitely lived up to its reputation. Yeah, I can only I could sing its song all day, really. I mean, I know I wrote the blog for Entrepreneurial Scotland, which is also there to read. So my mind refers back to that because it was so impressive. It was so sleek. It was almost theatrical and a performance in places, but not at a cheesy level. It's just the sheer experience, the variety, the knowledge and the wisdom for those professors that just approach it in a completely different way. It's quite difficult to explain what that's like until you're actually out there. But it just enables you to look at theory, look at practice, look at case studies in a completely different way that I think helps you just to take that time and apply. Like I said, sort of in the blog, there's some of the theory I'd actually learned and covered in previous roles and in previous incubators, but it's just a fresh perspective that actually adds value in new ways.
Yeah. So certainly the Babson piece hit a big tick there. And Scott, I might get you to take the other side of the coin then. So what about the Boston piece? And I know you took the opportunity massively, didn't you, to make connections whilst you were there?
Yeah, so as Paul said, it's a big decision for any entrepreneur to take some time away. So I took probably an extra week, some days either side, and tried my best to just meet as many people as I could, find out about business culture, legislation, tax, as America's a lot different. So yeah, I get lots of connections. If anyone is going, just people are so helpful there because we went to a networking dinner and I'm recording this from Ayrshire, and there was 3 women round about me. I sat at a table, there was 3 other women there, and they were all from Ayrshire, and they were all Scottish, and they were all very friendly. So a surprised amount of Scottish people, but even the people that aren't, everyone's so willing to help you. So definitely being from Scotland has advantages kind of going anywhere in the world, but I think there's a nice link between Scotland and Boston. So for sure, don't just go for 7 days, do the course. You might want to relax either side, but yeah, have a couple of days being a tourist and spend the other few days you're there out with either side and make the best of it. You're travelling all that time to get there. You're taking out the time of your business. If you're taking a week out, it's just as easy to take an extra 2 days and really immerse yourself. We went to networking, we met other people, I met local people. Everyone was so willing to help. I could have spent another week there.
Good. Thanks, Scott. Thanks, Paul. And I think that's one of the things that I'm keen to get across to people who are considering joining us over in Boston. The program itself is a blend of development through Babson College, inspiration through the companies that you visit and the organizations and the culture that you experience, and connections that we facilitate through our links with Scottish Development International, our connections to the Global Scott Network. And as you picked up there, Scott, there are just so many people who they may have a Scottish connection, or they may be people that we have met indirectly, but there's a huge willingness to bring entrepreneurs up to the next level and share their experience. So we really make the most of that whilst you're there. So guys, I'm keen to make sure that we do have time for the questions from the audience. But the last thing I wanted us to touch on is that we are unapologetic about the fact that we catch up with everybody before they come out to Boston. And we spend time with you asking what your strategic focus is likely to be when you come back from the program. And that's because we want you to get into a mindset that is making the most of your time in Boston and asking the questions that are pertinent to you, which is actually quite a selfish approach to things. We want you unapologetically to get the most of it for yourself. But we then put you into a peer group of other entrepreneurial leaders within a cohort who also have the same brief. They are also trying to get the most of the program for themselves and ask the questions that relate to them most. Now we think that there's an awful lot of benefit in that, but I'd like to hear your perception of what that cohort environment does for your wider learning.
Yeah, I think it's really important. So if you are going out on the trip to Boston, then Entrepreneurial Scotland themselves do a really good job in organising the whole thing, making it very seamless, but also, as Jules touched on, that piece beforehand to understand, where you are in your business, what the challenge, what your focus, what your interests to learn, because that gets fed into the lecturers as well, and they've got a mastery in terms of kind of going with the flow a little bit whilst you're out there, but as much information they have beforehand, they can tailor the learning journey to suit the audience. So I definitely got a lot out of both kind of the pre-planning, but also, fresh stuff comes up whilst you're out there and you throw fresh questions at the lecturers. They also put their own time aside. I met up with a couple of them during lunchtimes. I also stayed behind for a few days like Scott, and one of them invited me back to talk specifically about food and drink and potentially connect me to some angel investors in America. So I think, if you're able to be a little bit focused, but also open-minded to wander, then you'll get the most out of it.
Good response. Scott?
I suppose a nice example to sum up for anyone thinking of going is that one of the cohort was a sixth generation timber merchants, and they had been going for 50 years. And I suppose going into it, I think, well, when we met in the meet-up, I'm like, well, I won't have anything in common with them because they're a family business, been going 60 years. We're 3 years old and we manage property. But actually, it was amazing just how much we learnt from them, of course. But they looked at things because they had a different structure, they had different marketing outlets. So going with people in the same business, the exact same business as me, would have been detrimental because there was such a range of people that did apps, technology, food and drink. The different ranges just meant you came across solutions to problems that we had that were looked at it from a totally different point of view. You had the academics helping you, of course, but the brothers that were there from the timber merchants looked at it totally different to I would. And that was the same with Paul's advice and Paul's comments. So when you look at it, you've obviously got the lecturers and the professors delivering the content, but for me, 50% of the value was from the other people's, their comments, their viewpoints. So I found that rewarding just as much as the actual content of the academic side.
It's a really good point, and I'd add to that a lot of learning comes from those conversations with the other cohort that you don't always get when you're just locally. So you're in a different environment and different conversations emerge, and whether it was in the bar afterwards, whether it was on the taxi on the way to a baseball game, the conversation just you get past some of the pleasantries and the initial what do you do and what stage that you're at, and you actually get to some really in detailed conversations, and I think everybody was learning from each other, which was in a different kind of way, which is really interesting to see.
Yeah. So certainly we feel that a lot of the value that you get from the experience comes from your colleagues in the cohort themselves. And in October, there will be an element of peer-to-peer learning. Those of you who are already signed up to it know that you will have the opportunity to discuss your own case studies, and perhaps get the insights and recommendations and thinking from the entrepreneurs that you're on the program with, as well as the opportunity to meet the entrepreneurs that are coming in from an external environment to inspire with their stories and their experience. So those of you who have dialed in, I'm going to encourage you to have a think about any questions that you want to raise. Please do pop them up onto the Q&A, because we will attempt to kind of address them all. And as I say, I don't want you to just hear it from me. I'm really keen for you to hear some of the responses from Paul and from Scott. But as you're thinking of your questions, guys, if I can just ask, is there anything else that you think you should share with a group of people who are considering taking this step of saying, I want to learn in a different way. I want to challenge myself as an entrepreneurial leader. And I want to perhaps, take what I am as an entrepreneurial leader in Scotland, but be open to different perspectives by stepping overseas and accepting challenge in a different way. Is there anything else that you think you should perhaps share about that?
There's not too much more. I'm more than happy to, answer any questions here or later if people want to have more of a detailed chat as well. For me, it's just about, it's an amazing opportunity to kind of grab it with both hands, be open-minded, to the art of the possibility, go with the flow. I chuck loads and loads of questions at the lecturers, and I got a lot of benefit out of that as well. So it's difficult to say because there are so many elements to the program. Just by traveling and being somewhere else with a cohort of diverse businesses, on top of the quality of the lecturers, it's just a blend of learning that I took away 100 key takeaways, which I typed up afterwards, and I'm still referring to them. And actually, through my blog, I had people that had been out to Babson, I think 20 odd years ago, and were saying that the blog brought back so much, and they're still referring to their notes, and they're still in contact with networks. So it really is an investment in lifelong learning, and that's the way that I view it. It's going to shape my work in this business and potentially future business or future roles for a long time to come.
So two things I would add. One is we were told to think big before we went, but Americans do think really, really big. So regardless of how big your plans are, you'll find that you will come back with much bigger plans because you're like, why was I so unambitious when you come back? And secondly, the one thing the Americans are different about over there that you can take away and change you as a leader is that they're not scared of failure. Here, we get seen as if someone fails, people would talk about them, you would be shamed. But over there, actually starting your second business, having failed dramatically in the first one, you almost get more kudos and you're taken more seriously. So it does change certainly your dreams and aspirations, but also your risk perspective. Because actually, if you try to be an entrepreneur and you fail, then perhaps you learn lessons and you can come back stronger. So not that we would expect anyone to fail, but knowing in the background that actually, being ambitious, thinking big is actually a positive thing, and we shouldn't feel bad for that. There's two things I took away: thinking big and not being afraid to fail.
Fab. Okay, so I can see we've got a new question in from Pooja here, which is fantastic. So let me have a quick run through the first three questions that had been submitted prior to the webinar. First up, the big question about is funding available? So the fee for the programme is around £5,000 per person. There are some access points to funding that a lot of organisations do, a lot of entrepreneurs do look at. This is definitely a programme that is recognised by Scottish Enterprise. It's a programme that's recognised by a number of investors. And there are a number of programmes that people might be involved within that it's worth highlighting. Could there be some support funding associated with it? For others, there's also the additional aspect that if you are looking to develop your business in America, this might be serving a different purpose as well, as you actually look to kind of open that new market, which might mean that you have conversations with people like Scottish Development International. So whilst we do not have a bursary directly ourselves, the fee is often support funded by other agencies in the ecosystem. Scott, would you like to share a little bit about how you accessed the programme?
Yeah, so we were on a kind of Scottish Enterprise type scheme, so we get fully funded. So it was good. Basically, Scottish Enterprise had fully funded us, and yeah, we submitted an application form to them. We put a business case forward as to why we think that me personally getting funded could go to America, get some different learnings, bring that back and help our own business, but also help our team develop and help the Scottish economy. So we made a case that if the government were good enough to give us the money, we would give them it back 100-fold in helping the economy and sharing the learnings out.
So you will find that it is a known program to the ecosystem. So please, if you think that there could be an organisation you're working with who could offer some support funding, then fantastic. But equally, you were sitting on the cohort with other people who had funded their places entirely. We talked about the business that had been established for 150 years, Scott.
I must be thinking of Ayrshire generations. They got in 15s.
A very different model there. So I'm going to move to the next question about how do the one-to-one connections work. So Paul, we kind of set you up with one-to-ones whilst you were out there. Do you want to answer that a little bit?
Yeah, I think, well, it's tailored really to you as an entrepreneur and what you're looking to get out of the program. For me, there was some, I think I mentioned specific one-to-one discussions with the lecturers, but also with food and drink consultant, which was really useful. One, in understanding the American market. Two, around just general kind of entrepreneurial mentorship and advice. And again, through some questions and some advice and some support at me that just from a different angle that you just don't normally get here, which was quite cool. And then thirdly, we visited a few companies collectively, but I also had a one-to-one with a funky kind of craft brewery startup. So a little bit different to our drink, so non-competing in that way, but and still fairly early stages like us. And yeah, so it was amazing to kind of sit down and see how they're operating in that market, but also how they were operating some of the many similar challenges like co-manufacturing and branding and marketing and IP protection. So I gained a lot from that.
Yeah, and I think you might have picked up from some of the comments that both the guys have made earlier that it is a blend between the facilitated one-to-ones and connections that Entrepreneurial Scotland will play a part in making, but also the opportunity that you take to make your one-to-one connections whilst you're there. Scott, you certainly took that responsibility on your own shoulders, didn't you, and got out amongst it. And I think you're coming back in October and have obviously seen the opportunity to do more of that.
Yeah, so again, I'm going twice in a year, so I wouldn't do that if I didn't think it was beneficial. But we're all free to make our own connections, but the one that was facilitated as part of the trip that we did spend some time. So Jules took the time to find out exactly who that person would be and linked me up with the ideal candidate. So I had certain aims that I had to achieve. I didn't know anything about setting my business up in the US. Jules facilitated that with someone that could help me. I now know what business structure, what state to set it up, which is the most tax efficient, safest and most legal. And we now have a plan to come to the US, and I did not have that before that one-to-one meeting. So it isn't just you need to organise your own meetings. Entrepreneurial Scotland will hook you up with people probably that you wouldn't get access to if you just walked in off the street or hit them up because of the connection that organisation has. So it was amazing for me.
Good. Fantastic. I'm going to jump to Pooja's question actually, because I think it links to this. So how much time did you have for networking in the evening post lectures? You did a variety of things. I'm just going to let you guys answer that one.
Yeah, I think there was quite a good balance. The learning itself was quite intense at times, but for me in a positive way. I think the first couple of days felt like a couple of weeks, and then once you're into the rhythm of things, the next few days flew by way too quickly. But yeah, there was a few evenings where we had, deliberately planned in time for networking. We got out to a baseball game, so we were networking amongst ourselves whilst enjoying some of the local sport. And then it varies a little bit depending on the number of meetings that you've arranged through Entrepreneurial Scotland or through yourself. So I got out running a couple of times in the morning, which was great. Through one of the networking events, I met a couple of guys in biotechnology, so completely different industry. Went running with them in downtown Boston one morning.
To clarify, that was at the networking dinner that we arranged. You happened to sit next to someone who was also a runner.
Was also a runner. Was involved in a running group, which was essentially there to network for startups and biotech. So I joined them and had a few great conversations whilst running along the pristine river.
Something I could never do, network and run at the same time.
Yeah, so I think there's some great opportunities put on the plate for you, but there's also around making the most of it yourself and networking with the business and the people that you do meet and the lecturers that you meet. And as Scott said, everybody's super, super helpful to try and support you and connect you. So you really can make a lot out of the trip.
Yeah. And Scott, you did some of this connecting on the fly, so to speak. You were making connections as you went along during the week, weren't you? But you're coming out again in October, and it sounds like you're with the experience that you've had, you're able to proactively plan some of that networking. But yeah. Networking on the fly, as we went along to the reception that we had, we went to the venture cafe, different opportunities. Was it useful to you?
Yeah, again, Pooja's question, how much time did you have for networking? Plenty of time. So the schedule during the day is very, very intense. There was some evening things, but we did get free nights, and there was lots of opportunities. I just filled that up with getting meetings. So lots of things. There's various business apps you can have that links business people up. So I just met with people. I didn't know about American legislation. They needed help in marketing. So sometimes we would just literally go for dinner, and it would be a one-on-one. They would tell me what I needed to know, and I would work on their sales funnel or whatever. So I just made personal connections and used every single spare minute. And yeah, I think I had one afternoon off where I wasn't doing anything, but yeah, I made the best of the time.
And go on.
The other thing I would add is Jules touched on Scottish Development International and Global Scots, so two great resources. You can network yourself, but perhaps through those organisations or Scottish Enterprise, anybody else that might have connections out in Boston. I did some retail sites visits through Scottish Development International as well, which was partly planned and supported by Entrepreneurial Scotland. So there are Scottish businesses and organisations based there that can support you with that networking piece as well.
Mm-hmm. Just to reassure the folk who are looking at coming out to Boston in October, you will have a similarly intense set of days where you will have time at Babson College, and there will be other days where we're taking you to visit organisations in the city or facilitate one-to-ones with people that it's sensible for you to meet. There are 2 evenings that you will have networking activity that will tie up your time, but then other evenings you do have your own agenda. And whilst we're joined here in this webinar by 2 people who are very proactive in terms of making connections that were relevant for their business whilst they were there were others on the programme who were also there to actually give themselves some reflective space from their business. And for a lot of very good reasons, they would perhaps, take the time in the evening to recharge. And digest and reflect on what they'd learned. And there was another group as well that was probably saying, I kind of need to check in with home as well. I need to make sure that, that the business operations, that I am in the hot seat. I need to kind of make sure that I can re-engage with my team back at Basecamp. So different people on the cohort that you join will have different objectives. Is that fair?
Yeah, very fair. I think we had somebody on the cohort that was close to sort of full launch of their technology platform. So spent a lot of their spare time still sort of working and on the phone and on the email. So there is that flexibility built in as well.
Yeah. Guys, if you do have any other questions, I see, scroll up, anonymous attendee. The course has a cost, but obviously other costs are involved through entertainment events. How much did the overall experience cost you? Scott, you mentioned Uber earlier.
Yeah, that won't apply this time. So I mean, I thought the trip was amazing the last time. This trip is better. We stayed in Babson, which is ages away. So if you had meetings, you had to pay for an Uber yourself, and it might be, $40, $50 there, $40, $50 back. But now we're right next to public transport. So I took that transport. It cost $7. So the difference of $14 versus $100. No, again, America is Boston. It's going to be slightly more expensive than, say, Glasgow. But yeah, nothing. If you just went, I think all the food was provided last time. So we ended up with, we get little cards. I had $200 left in mine. So there was money we get given I didn't spend. So I don't know how that balances up to this trip. But yeah, we got a hosted dinner by a billionaire. So you could go and spend very little. I like to experience the city and go out and stay afterwards. So there was extra accommodation costs. But yeah, $1,000 should probably do it, and you would never. There isn't extravagant things that you're going to need to go on that you would need to be self-conscious about. So you won't be put in a situation where you're like, I don't want to spend money in that. It's all inclusive to a degree. If you want to go and have some fun and do other stuff, then it's up to you.
You went to the Red Sox, didn't you?
Yeah, I really didn't spend that much money over the trip, to be honest. Like all the food was paid for, I think, which helped, and the dinners. Most of the Ubers I got were shared because, between us, we were collectively going to and from places. I think I jumped on a bus and on a train once just to kind of experience the local thing. That was fairly cheap. We got tickets to the Red Sox from a tout outside the game for, I think, about $10. And the stadium was fairly empty, so we actually moved seats and kind of in a position where it probably should have been around $250. Overall, it really wasn't that expensive. Staying a couple of days afterwards, I just used Airbnb, which was fairly cost efficient.
Yeah. And just for those of you who want to know what's included and what's not, for the October trip, you have a free afternoon where you get to be a tourist, I think on the Sunday afternoon. So your lunch and your evening meal are for yourself to work out on that occasion. And there is one occasion when we spend the day in the city, and we'll probably go to somewhere like the Spice Restaurant where you get served by robots. But it's up to you to get your lunch in a cafe on that day, because different people want different meals. So there are 2 lunches and 1 dinner that you're probably looking after yourselves. But apart from that, I would expect your cost to be fairly minimal in addition to what you've covered with your fees and accommodation. Okay, so let's move on to, do you think it would benefit an artist? By default, being a professional artist requires being an entrepreneur, knowing business strategies, etc. What are your thoughts?
It's an interesting one. Yeah, I mean, a huge part of the benefit for me is around challenging your thinking and approach to business. So in that respect, potentially applies to everyone. And what you're highlighting there around, just general entrepreneurial business strategies, approach. We covered sales and marketing, and some of them had specific technical angles to them, but a lot of it was just around challenging your thinking on how to approach those. So I would see it as very much applying.
Yeah, so I think if you take away the whole academic side of it, literally just being in Boston as a city was amazing. I was in a city I'd never been to before, just walking about felt amazing. Some of my best thinking happened away from Babson, and it was literally sitting in the sun in Boston Common with people walking past, just sitting against a tree. So some of my best creative ideas definitely came from there. So there's the academic side, but I think just going to America and Boston especially, just going to fuel creative juices. And yeah, just literally being in the city and seeing different ways of doing things is just as amazing as literally being on campus to me. Others might have a different view.
So, Tina, we can perhaps catch up separately on this one. There's a couple of creative accelerators in Scotland that perhaps you're already connected with as well. So it might be that there's some obvious links through from the existing ecosystem connections that you have. Ilya, hello. How interactive were the lectures, and what was your favourite? So just to help you understand the 2 programs that we've talked about, the one that you guys came to in May, June, and the one that we're going to in October, the content is different, but the style is perhaps comparable. So I think the question's very valid. How interactive were the lectures, and what was your favourite? Guys?
Yes, super interactive. The lecturers, like I said, and masters are kind of going with the flow. And I had like I said, the opportunity to throw loads of questions. Some of it, they'll pick up with you afterwards and separately. I suspect there'll be a bit of an overlap potentially with some of the lecturers. We had 5 or 6 throughout the sort of week. Each of them, in specific areas. One a bit more technical and marketing. One which was really challenging your thinking. One which was a bit more analytical. One which was in leadership and felt a little bit more like therapy. So they all came from kind of slightly different angles with slightly different experience. But yeah, they're very versatile to kind of pick up on the needs and the questions and the challenges of the business. And I think, nothing's to script, or it's not. That's why I say the style of learning there is completely different. It's not like maybe sitting in a uni lecture here that we're familiar with, where you just listen to a lecture talk all the time and maybe get 1 or 2 questions at the end. It's very different.
Yeah, so it was definitely, it's not like being at school. When it says lecturers, you kind of think that they're standing at the front, but some were professors and academics, but there was many, probably half of them that asked, listen, I'm not an academic, I'm not going to teach you academic things. I am a business owner and I consult. So it isn't like someone's teaching, it's like I am a professional and I am well established in my own right as a business person. So it is just like getting advice and mentorship from other business people. And yeah, they basically say, what do you want out of today? I have my content, and sometimes they'll just miss bits out to focus on what the group want. Or my favourite, I suppose there's lots of great content, but one of the key takeaways for me was one of the professors or business people had said, listen, here's reasons why you shouldn't just believe what I say. Just because I am in a position of authority. His whole outlook was, you'll hear so many bits of advice in business. You'll hear them from business owners. You'll hear them definitely from academics and people in the education system, but it doesn't necessarily make them right. So always question what you're hearing. And that was one of the big things for me, was like, he's saying, I'm going to tell you this, but question what I'm saying. Don't just do it because you've paid to be here and I'm standing in front and I've got all these qualifications and letters after my name. You need to make up your own decision. And I was like, well, that's a pretty cool thing to say. And it was,
do you remember who that was? Do you remember who that was, Scott?
Was it Ray?
Oh, Jay Rayo.
Jay.
Yes. Okay, good stuff. Yes. So
I love that.
It's interesting, as you talk to people who have been through to Babson, there are just sound bites that everybody reflects back, and they remember when someone said that thing. That's what they lean back on. I heard you talking about allowing yourself to wander earlier.
Yeah.
Which was an expression that a few people picked up on, didn't they?
Yeah, wandering to wander. So I think that's their approach to learning, being open-minded, but also their approach to teaching. So they would wander with you, but only from kind of, really opening up your mind. And as Scott says, kind of challenging yourself, challenging them, challenging everybody around you, challenging what you learned before, how you practiced things before.
Yeah.
It's kind of I guess it's a culture that they instill in you, and a way of thinking from the very beginning that sees you throughout the week and throughout the course, that enables you to absorb all of that good stuff they're trying to teach you, expose you to.
Fab. Now I'm looking at the questions here. I can see, Tina, you're now giving us suggestions of where to take chocolate in Boston. You've obviously been to Boston and have an affinity with it. So thanks for your feedback there. Does anyone else have any more questions that you'd like to ask of either Paul or Scott? I'm not seeing other questions come in. Scott, Paul, is there any last parting shot that you would like to put out there before we close things down? Or
not really. Had an amazing experience. There's a few blogs actually from our cohort, which I think are on Entrepreneurial Scotland, so you can read that for more information. Would love to hear your experiences as well, to stay connected. I'm not going out in October, but I'm very keen to go out again. So yeah, I'm sure I'll stay connected to the program that way.
Fantastic.
Probably just to finish, I would say don't not go because you think you can't take time out your business. It would have been a mistake for me to say, "Hi, I'm so important that I can't take a week off my business," or "I am indispensable." If you can't take a week off your business, then there is a fundamental problem you need to solve, which means you should get out there more. But yeah, I didn't want to go and I didn't want to waste the time. Even this time, I've loads of stuff on, but the benefits to going will massively outweigh the detriment of you not being in your business as much over that, week period.
Can I say, Paul, Scott, thank you so much for coming back and sharing your experiences. Looking forward to seeing you again in October, Scott, and Paul, I'm quite sure that we'll see you again as you continue your journey. Those of you who have joined us on this webinar, if you have any other questions at all, please call in, have a chat with the team here at Entrepreneurial Scotland. We would love to answer any questions that you've not found an opportunity to talk through. There is still opportunity to sign up for the October programme. We've got 17 people already signed up to join us. You'd be very welcome to be the additional small handful that will make it into the cohort before we close it out completely at the end of this month.